This is part 2 of the APA PowerPoint. We were talking about paraphrasing, and again I wanted to reiterate that paraphrasing the words, thoughts, and ideas of other authors is simply taking ideas and thoughts and putting them into your own words. It's really your interpretation of what you believe the author said, and it's an expression of information in a new and different way. And that's what makes paraphrasing different from a direct quote. These next few slides provide some excellent examples of how to paraphrase. And one thing I would like to point out is that when you paraphrase, we don't generally include the page number. APA does have rules about including the page number with the paraphrasing, and in general a page number is included when information is very technical or complex, and in that case you would want to direct the reader to the source and page number so that they could read it for themselves if there were any questions. These next few slides just give you some different examples of how to cite the author within the paragraph or at the end of the paragraph, and that sort of depends on how you're phrasing your paragraphs, how you use that type of citation at the end or at the beginning, etc. Let's talk a little bit about citing an edited book. Many textbooks are edited books, and what that means is that multiple authors have written the chapters within the textbook, and the textbook has authors, people who are in charge of the book, who put the book together. They're often called the editors of the book. And so when you're citing an edited book, within the body of your paper, you cite the author of the chapter. Also on your reference page, you cite the author of the chapter. And then you see how within your citation, we are also citing the editors of the entire book. In this example, Napolitano was the author of the chapter that was cited within your paper. The title of the chapter was Migrant Health Issues. That chapter appeared in Stanhope and Lancaster. Their names are the ones that would appear on the front cover of the book as the editors of the book. The name of the book was Public Health Nursing, Population-Centered Healthcare in the Community. It's the 4th edition. And when citing a chapter from an edited book, you include all the page numbers of the chapter on your reference page. And then we have the city and state of publication and the publisher to follow. So how do you know if your textbooks or books you're citing is an edited book? It's because the authors of the chapters will be different. And if you have a book that was all written by one author, then there won't be an author name at the beginning of the chapter. So that's one key way that you can tell if the author wrote the whole entire book and all the chapters themselves, or if they invited other authors to participate in the book and then they put those chapters together. Citing a web page is interesting in APA. So for example, if you wanted to refer the reader to an entire web page like the American Nurses Association, then you would simply put that URL in your paper. A couple of really good electronic reference guides for you to be familiar with is, of course, Purdue OWL. I use that myself, and what I like about Purdue OWL is that it's the APA manual. So when I go to Purdue OWL, I see the same examples and references that I see in the printed version of the APA manual. And so for me, that makes it a very valid and reliable source. It's also quicker to look up in Purdue OWL than it is in the APA manual, because you can simply Google keywords like how to cite a textbook within Purdue OWL and it will take you right to that page. And you remember I said earlier that the APA manual was a little bit difficult to navigate until you got familiar with it. I don't believe the reference page is intuitive. And so if you're struggling trying to find things within the printed version of the APA manual, try looking it up in Purdue OWL. Another reference that I would encourage you to look at and use, it's very, very valuable, is the APA Style Guide to Electronic References. This is actually a supplement to the APA manual. APA, American Psychological Association, has finally jumped on board in terms of publishing some good examples, rules about how to cite electronic sources. So if you have a question about how to cite a blog, a video, a YouTube, anything that you find online, a web page, an article online, anything like that, you're going to be able to find an example within this style guide to electronic references. I would encourage you to download that and keep it on your desktop. It's a handy resource, and it helps us learn how to cite both within our paper and on our reference page these multiple electronic sources that we're all using. Personal communication is something else you might run across as you're writing your papers, and that's simply if you have a conversation with someone, you interview someone over the phone, maybe it's a discussion group that isn't saved anywhere, it's an interview, a phone conversation. This type of data is non-recoverable, so we don't ever cite personal communication on our reference page, but certainly if I'm quoting or paraphrasing someone that I interviewed, and I wanted to include that in the body of my paper, I could do that, and this is the way that I would cite it. If I was paraphrasing what T.K. Lutz said, then I would not include any page numbers, any quotes around her words, but I would give her name, her first initials, her last name, personal communication, that's the type of source that I'm using, and the full date of the interview, which occurred on September 18th, 2013. Now, if I wanted to directly quote T.K. Lutz, I wanted to put down exactly what she said during the interview or phone conversation, then her words go within quotation marks, just like all direct quotes do, and then her first initials, her last name, the type of data, personal communication, and the date that we had our conversation or our phone interview. Let's talk a little bit about the reference page. First of all, when you're constructing a reference page, the very first word at the top of your page should be references or references. We don't say bibliography or works cited. I often see that. It's a reference page that you're constructing in APA. Now, every article, book that you cite in your paper should appear on your reference page. And that's a little bit different than other types of works cited or bibliography. So you only include things on your reference page if it's been included in the body of your paper. So your reference page needs to be accurate, and that means every reference cited within the body of the paper must be on the reference page. You do not include works cited that were not in the body of the paper. And actually, that's the difference between a reference page and a bibliography. References are listed alphabetically by the surname of the author, and I give you some examples here on this slide. The other thing about the reference page is often you might run across articles that have multiple authors, and so APA has rules about how to cite multiple authors, both within the body of your paper and on your reference page, and I've given you some examples here to think about when you have 7 authors or when you have 8 or more authors. There's a specific way. We don't always include all their names on the reference page. What do you do if there's no author? Well, you simply move the title of the publication to the author position, like I've given you an example here of a work with no author. This slide gives you some examples of how to cite a book versus a journal. Notice here we have the same last name of the author, first initial period, the date of publication, the name of the book. Notice I've only used the first word has an uppercase letter. The rest of these have lowercase letters. It's the 4th edition of the book. It was published in Boston, Massachusetts by Allen and Bacon. Now, the difference between a book and a journal is in terms of what we're italicizing. So let's take a look at this example. We have 3 authors. We have the year of publication. This is the name, the title of the journal article, and again notice the use of upper and lowercase letters here. we have the name of the journal, and it is italicized, as is the volume number, this is the issue number, and these are the page numbers. And all of those elements need to be included when you're citing a journal article, whether you retrieve that article online or you read the print copy. Now, most of you, if you're looking at current articles, you're going to be finding digital object identifier numbers associated with your articles, and we want to include those on our reference page. Notice my example. I'm citing a journal article here. I have Smith, the year of publication, the title of the article, the title of the journal italicized, as is the volume number, the issue number, and I have page numbers. The only thing that I've added here is the DOI number. And please note that the DOI number is all lowercase letters. Again, examples about how to cite information from the web. When you're citing information on your reference page from the website, we say retrieved from, and we provide the URL. Notice there's no period at the end of the URL because that would change that URL. And the other thing about URLs on a reference page is they are not in blue font and they're not underlined, and I often see that on a reference page. It should be black font and there should be no underlining. Here's an example of a correctly formatted reference page for you to look at. And I see a journal article here. I see something from the web. I see another journal article. I see an example of a chapter from an edited book here. Here's a video file. So lots of different examples of resources that you might use here on this slide for you to look at as you're constructing your own reference page. APA has rules about abbreviations, and I see this in students' papers that it's kind of all over the place, but let me tell you what the rule is. The rule is the first time you use a term, you need to write it out. So for example, the United States, you'll write out the full title, United States, and following you'll put the initials U.S. in parentheses. And then any other time that you use the term United States within your paper, you'll simply abbreviate. So the first time the term is used, you need to write it out so that the reader knows what the term is. Then you include your abbreviation to follow, and then you use the abbreviation throughout your paper. These last few slides give you some examples of some common APA errors that faculty often see in student papers. And I would encourage you to look at these. I'm not going to read them all to you, but a couple of things I'll point out here. I often see an uppercase H in the running head on the title page, and that it should be a lowercase h. Often the page number is missing from the title page, and so when you're numbering the pages of your paper, page 1 goes on your title page. I often see the entire title of the paper in the running head, and remember we talked about that should only be 1 to 3 words. And go ahead and take a look at these. There's lots of things for you to look at and to consider and to incorporate into your writing, because they will help you get your full APA points, and they'll help you master the basics of APA and to get really good at using that in your papers. And again, this PowerPoint presentation was courtesy of the American Psychological Association. If you haven't bought the book, I encourage you to do so. Get familiar with it. Make it your friend, like we talked about, and don't hesitate to ask questions, to seek help, to look for examples, to look at feedback, and really incorporate some of these ideas and examples that we've given you into your writing. Doing so will help you communicate very, very effectively in your writing, and that's the goal. Okay, thank you.